All right, welcome back. So, I want to talk a little bit more about the technical aspect of working with people with limitations. What do we do to help somebody regain balance and symmetry in their bodies and feel better moving and optimize their joint health? Mike, do you have anything on that?
Um, well, that's going to depend on the individual, and that's where there's a little bit of there's a science to this, but there's an art to it too. In when people first come in, like if you come in and you're a senior, I have yet to see anybody who comes in at like 100% is totally healthy. They need to be shown where the equipment is, not what the equipment is. Everybody comes in, they have like multiple issues. It might just be a rotator cuff and knee issues, or they might have some sort of neurological or metabolic issue going on. But not a lot of people come in who only have one thing going on. So you got to take everything into account, and just like a doctor, first and foremost, do no harm, because you don't want to make anything worse. And that's why you always want to do like the PARQ and find out what their injury history is, find out a little bit about their medical history that may be relevant to their training. And then I always start out I always try to make the very first session with somebody more educational in nature, and I always try to tell them too that you want this to sort of hurt your ego more than your body. Like the amount of work we're actually going to get done day one, it's almost insultingly low. Like, can you step up on a step? You know what I mean? If somebody comes in, it's like, that might seem so small and minute, but like, I'm trying to look at other things, not just whether you can step up on the step. I'm looking to see if you can do it both ways. I'm looking to see, on the kinetic chain, like if you fall apart, if you got to put your hand on your knee to get up on the step first. Like, there's a lot of things I want to know about, like how you move before we progress you on to doing, what I consider like ideal training, which would be getting people up to where they can do squats, presses, deadlifts. And part of that training is, one, seeing how they move, and two, sometimes you got to sort of have kid gloves with people, and that you can't say you're going to do squats because their doctor probably told them squats are bad for their knees. But then when you ask them to demonstrate a squat, what they're doing is like a horrible example of a squat, so there's no wonder why it's hurting their knees. And then when you teach them to hinge from the hip and get their butt back rather than letting the knees project forward, you don't usually have quite so many problems. But even just to get to that point, you've got to go back to flexibility, because if you have tight hamstrings and tight hips, hinging from the hip is not going to work quite so easy. Or even, you could be tight anywhere. You could be tight at the Achilles too. That'll throw things off. So, yeah, again, I would just go back to strength and flexibility, then strength, and I'm usually working with people to try to get them to the point where they can do a squat, a press, and a deadlift. And not even with a lot of weight either, like, just squatting with your own body weight, because you need that for functional living. If you say you can't squat, I always wonder, well, how are you going to get up off the toilet? Right? You know what I mean? A deadlift is just picking something off the floor. Like, you got to pick stuff up off the floor, like at home or in the garage. A press is just putting something up overhead. You always got to put something up on the top shelf or up on top of the car. Sometimes there's not people around to do that for you, and you can't just avoid it for the rest of your life. But we work up to that.
Yeah.
So again, it depends on where the person is, but I usually try to work with them in their individual issues, and then get them to where they can do those three. Then we can start modifying things based on preferences a little bit more than needs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, interesting, and just focusing on the fundamental movements, and also you have your three foundational movements that you're building up to. So that's pretty standardized approach. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I'd like to dovetail a little bit on what Mike started on talking about, and you mentioned the PARQ, right? So we do want to find out if our members have any kind of medical restrictions, and if they do, what those are, and do they have some kind of, do they need clearance from their doctor, right, to start an exercise program? So, but with that, I think it's important to do the term we've all heard is assessment. So I try to get people to tell me what is it they want, what do they want to do, what do they think they need to do, what goals do they have, along with what their restrictions are. And then I try to help them get a little specific about those goals. Like giving me a time frame if they want to lose 10 pounds over what period of time, or if they're trying to, get ready for some type of event. How, is it 3 months from now? Is it 6 months from now? And so forth. And then what's been keeping them from their goals? If they're trying to lose 10 pounds, but they eat with the family and the kids always want fattening foods or whatever, what are the things at home or in their job or in their lifestyle that's been holding them back from reaching their goals or their fitness goals? So, assessment, how well do they move? I remember from the Parkinson's training I went to that one of the first things the instructor asks someone to do is walk across the floor. How well does that person move just walking? Walks down the end of, or to the other side of the room, turn around and come back. So does the person have a smooth gait? Does the person have a symmetric gait, or is he favoring one side over another, or is she having difficulty maintaining a direct line, right? So those are some of the things that you would look for. And there's a few other very basic assessment tools that we can use. And often you would do that in the very first meeting with someone. So those are some of the things that I look or try to do early when I'm talking with people who come in particular for seniors and people with restrictions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to a few things, and one of them is just the nature of how we interact with people here. I think, well, certainly for me, most of the people I work with here, I do just an orientation with them, or maybe they ask me a couple of questions. So we have like 1 or 2 encounters, and we give them some advice, and then they go on and practice on their own. And that assessment process, I think, is really important. But also, if we have somebody who's going to be wanting a little bit more personal coaching or wants to be in a group exercise class, having an initial assessment with them and having a protocol that we follow, I think is really important. I know I have basically a program that I like to have people start with, and there's a given number of exercises, and really what we're trying to do is find a version of that exercise that is appropriate for that person. And as far as I'm concerned, an appropriate exercise is one that you can do through a full range of motion, under control, and pain-free. And I think, Mike, you were talking a little bit about that and how we need to take people where they are, and pain is really one of the main indicators for whether or not an exercise is going to be right for somebody and help them out.
Another thing too, especially with the older population, you really have to differentiate like what kind of pain it is, because there's different types of pains. There's like dull chronic pains, and then there's like sharp stabbing pains, and then there's a whole litany of different kinds of pains. And obviously you don't want to do anything that will make an injury worse, or you don't want to create a new injury. But I've found more often than not, people who have just chronic pain who come in and start training at a low level and progress up over like 3 to 6 months usually report less pain than they had before. And I don't have a specific study to cite for that, but I just know from experience that that's usually what happens.
Well, that's a good point. I think the reality is if somebody has been sedentary, it's not going to feel good at first. When you start working out, it's going to feel terrible. But if you can persevere through that initial struggle, that's going to feel better and better. You're going to feel better throughout your day. And the other reality is that if you're coming off of an injury, that's also going to be very challenging, and it's going to be very uncomfortable physically at times. But again, yeah, I think, I can't remember who was talking about squatting, and you either avoid squatting or you fix the way that you're squatting. You could avoid an injury or you can address an injury. And I think
get taller chairs at home.
Yeah, well, the ergonomic solutions, but also just the exercises that you're doing. I hope that's where we can come into play. I know there's a lot of people who just with a little bit of an adjustment, hip hinging you were talking about, if we can teach the hip hinge, and it's very interesting how that does, it's non-intuitive, maybe, and that's just a cultural thing, but people, when you ask them to squat, there's a lot of maybe confusion about how to best go down into a squat, for instance.
Yeah.
So we could go on about the technical aspect of this, but I really briefly wanted to go also back to the community aspect of what we're doing here, and particularly for our largest demographic, our seniors. What do you guys think are some of the services that we're offering here that are really benefiting the seniors in this community?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
All right. Well, I think we've talked about a few of them, right? You talked about muscle time. I mentioned pickleball, right? We have lots of classes. We have yoga classes, and of course there's aquatics, right? We have a whole aquatics program, and they have some new things going on there. The socialization part of it you mentioned, that's really important. Someone else reminded me yesterday that we have programs for young people, such as we send them on field trips. I think they're 6th graders or 8th graders. We send them to Gettysburg.
Oh, Freedom Tour.
Freedom Tour.
Yeah.
Well, seniors, he mentioned to me, seniors can get involved in supporting our young people. And some of the seniors that we could get in here are terrific resources for stuff like that. So, I'd like to learn more about the Freedom Tour, and if I could, help support that kind of activity for young people, that would be good. I feel good about that.
I've actually chaperoned Freedom Tour twice, and it's an exhausting week, but it's a lot of fun.
Sign me up.
It's a lot of fun. And actually, there's sort of an equivalent trip that we do. It's the if you're going to look at like the best program for the seniors, it's hard. You have to define best, but if you're looking for something fun and social to do, we have the Sky Lodge Quebec trip, which is kind of like Freedom Tour, except it's for seniors, and 2, it's a little bit more of a party than it is an educational experience. So I think there's a lot of similarities between seniors and teenagers, especially once you get them out of the camp and out past the forks, and then go hang out in Quebec for a couple days. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I won't name names or tell exact stories, but it's a lot of fun.
Gets pretty wild, huh? That's great. I'm glad you brought that up. And also, Joe does a lot of really cool things with those guys, and frequently, I think every other month, he has a potluck with them after one of our classes or in the evening. Everybody gets together and they have a potluck. So that is really, really huge, because a lot of the seniors, that regularly come here, they all know each other, and they all get together for these things. And this is like the meeting place.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to come and, like what were you saying about a member who says the only time he talks to anybody besides his wife is when he comes to the Y?
Yeah, that blew my mind. This was like just a couple months ago. A guy upstairs told me like this is his social time when he comes here, and the only other person he talks to all throughout the day was his wife. And I thought he was exaggerating at first, but then he like confided in me that he's like, that's really how it is. I was like, man, you get to spend more time here or like go somewhere else, like, but then I don't know what it was, but that was like the break in the dam that sort of led to a cascade where I heard a couple more stories that same week, and I even saw some articles on social media talking about how senior isolation is like this big problem that nobody's talking about. Like Maine's got a lot of problems. If you look at Medicare, education, drug issue and heroin and stuff, but like senior isolation, that's really a pretty common one, but nobody really talks about it. And I think Ys are in a unique position to really address and impact that in the communities where you can find them. I think there's like 13 or 16 Ys in the state, and I know here we definitely fit that niche.
Yeah, I can see it. Having grown up in a community where we didn't have really anything like this, and we see it. We can talk about the kids too and how important it is for the kids, but also for the seniors. I wonder if the seniors here know how lucky they are, because I feel like this is kind of unique. Not all communities around the United States, I would say few communities around the United States have something like this. And the community within the community that's been built, maybe it was around the muscle time class, but I know also the classes that they do in the aquatic center, some of the yoga classes that we teach, these are bringing seniors out and giving them the kind of workout that they want, and that will also facilitate the social time.
Well, honestly, the best thing you can do is actually just come in and look at the place. Obviously we have both our sites, 303 Center Street, and there's a 24 Venture Ave, I think, over in Brunswick. I mean, just go check it out, or at least check out the website. We have a lot. I don't even know where to start. There's like 50 hours of classes between the pool and the dry land training, like over the course of a week. And then there's all the special events like the potlucks and the fun trips. There's a lot going on. I mean, I don't even know where to start. But those are some of the big ones.
Another thing, seniors like to travel. Right? Most seniors do. Not all of them can afford it, but many of them do like to travel. And if you like to travel, a membership here will save you money. It may not be free, but you can save money using YMCAs across the country. I know that not all are completely reciprocal, but if you're a member at a Y, you can usually get in at another Y for either cheap or free. So that's a good thing to keep in mind.
That's a good point.
How are we doing for time?
I think we're probably over. Okay, so this was a great discussion. Thank you so much for joining me. Maybe we'll do it again sometime soon.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good night.
Thanks. Would you call this a Y-cast?
Y-cast.